I've been playing Enfield for way too much time and started noticing a lot of random details that most people will probably never discover. So today I present to you my collection of most random Enfield facts that I found interesting or amusing. In Wooling, there are some places where you can drain out the water. What they usually don't tell you that you can also fill it back. However, you can actually use any liquid for it and not just water, and a lot of them look very unappealing. But they also do keep their effects if liquid has any. For example, solution made from healing plants will also heal you if you stand inside it. Even though Endman's mask fully covers their face, they're actually fully animated behind it and are in fact very expressive. I think it's pretty obvious by now, but I fully expect it to come off at certain point in story. You know how Perlica's ult looks like she uses powers to spawn a giant rock even though her element is not nature but electric? That is because she doesn't use arts for that attack, instead she just commands Dijan to teleport the rock into the enemies. Until is pretty open about finding Fluorite attractive, at least a certain part of her. And yes, I am talking about her tail. Fluorite doesn't mind him much, though his staring sometimes gets on her nerves and she completely forbade him from touching. In the very beginning of the game, you go through a place which does appear to be a graveyard, and a lot of players were confused and just kept going on. But if you interact with gravestones, it mentions many names that you may be familiar with if you played the original Arknights. Back in early betas, Chen actually wasn't such a silly goofball as she appears now, and because of that her design looked a lot more serious. Some may say even closer resembling her counterpart in original Arknights. However, over the course of several betas, they made her sillier and sillier until she became what we know now. In Power Plateau, there is a guy who seems to be standing and praying before eating his food. I often run past him on the way to collect some resources, but recently noticed that he is not just praying to God or something similar, there is actually a picture on the table. And I would never in my life guess that it was a picture of Yvonne. Is he like canonically a simp, or he is just that genuinely grateful for what she done? Does he even know who she is? For whatever reason, this game has pretty detailed feet of characters to the point where you can even see their toes through shoes. If you ask me how I noticed, pretty much all 5 and 6 star weapons can change their appearance pretty noticeably in 2 different cases. One, if you max their potential, they usually get a slight color change, though sometimes it's more drastic or get some pattern appearing on top of it. Another one, if you get a perfect essence, that being one with all 3 fitting stats, it gets a special glowing effect. Unfortunately, I didn't notice anything like that in 4 star weapons, but let me know if I overlooked. Similarly, characters can also get a special effect, though I believe it's only max potential and it's unique for 6 star characters. I unfortunately don't own any of them myself, but here's some footage that I was able to find. And hey, subscribe so I can one day afford them too. Speaking of 6 stars, many of them have unique double dash animations. Here's Pogranichnik pulling himself with whip and doing a short slide. Lifan shows off his parkour skills and does a front flip. And Gilbera, just like a true witch, flies on her broom. Many characters have unique behavior during their idle, and I'm not talking about their idle animations. If you AFK for some time, your operators may start wandering around observing different objects, and it does seem that pretty much all of them have a preference. For example, Perlica seems to be interested in different machines and tech, while Lastrite is a lot more fascinated by nature, such as different plants and animals. In Science Park, there is a peculiar vending machine that doesn't quite seem to work. As the description states, it seems that the only function of that machine is dispensing of hopium. Zhang Fangyi, despite having a very impressive entrance and taking us out on a very mature date, is in fact a girl failure. During the story and from other NPCs, you can learn that she just lives on eating junk food in her office every day. And she did fall victim to the very gacha that she herself came up with and now spends pretty hefty sums on it regularly. Honestly, it makes me like her even more. If you look closer at Yvonne's model, no, not that part this time, you can see some pink parts in the end of her tail and horns, and it doesn't really resemble natural color. In fact, you can even see what seems to be paint splashes where a color changes, which makes me think she just dipped her horns and tail in pink paint, something similar to nail polish. And in fact, you can find a note with her ordering a liter of pink paint with note that states got big horns. In some areas in Wooling, you can get under the rain, and besides obviously changing weather, it actually affects your operators too. All of them for some reason have very unique wet models, and not only take into account material of their clothing and how long they've been under the rain, but also take into account their body shape. You can see characters whose outfits are made with water repellent materials such as leather, plastic or even glass will have water droplets clearly seen on top of their clothes. On the other hand, those with water absorbent outfits will have their clothes just get wet. And in both cases, the longer you stay under the rain, the more and more droplets will fall onto the characters. It actually works the opposite way too. Once you get out, you can see their clothes slowly dry out, though the time for it seems to randomly change. And maybe the most important part, characters with big, assets will have a noticeably drier areas right under those assets. Also, fun fact, you can replicate this effect to a certain extent by showering your operators from Wooling Drone, and water this way seems to stay way longer and even persist through teleports. When you start Aberrant's exploration, it spawns you on so-called safe zone. In the middle of that zone, you can find a giant bonfire made out of bunch of tires and logs with a giant sword stuck in them directly from above. It's only reasonable to assume that it's a reference to iconic Dark Souls bonfires, since they look very similar. At certain point in the story, Tantan gives us a stone plate with what she says her name written on top of it. Before seeing it, some people assume that her name in Chinese may mean something like sweetie, but that character on the plate actually translates to soup, so yes, she is in fact a soup. When switching now from Last Right's weapon menu to the overview, she throws out her claymore without thinking much, only to realize what happened as you hear it clatter on the background. Characters have pretty unique and funny chats that only unlock it to 100% trust that lets you know that you two really became friends. For example, Li Fang finally figures out that Enmin isn't really a big distant hero and is in fact more of a completely clueless Originium slug. By the way, it is exactly his words. While time seems to be static in Enfield, background sky is fairly different in different regions. Normally you can't see it change because game makes you go through narrow and closed paths, but you can manage to put ziplines close enough and travel through them. That reveals that there is actually somewhat of an animated change for this interaction, even though it looks unfinished. Well, you might have seen this one already, but the Pan has truly the best item finding animations. On the same note, he has very unique way of sprinting with those wooling wind currents, which does look pretty funny. And that's about all random facts I could recall. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to not miss any of the future ones. And as always, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye!